At this point of the Dynasty offseason, you are having to make some extremely difficult decisions with your rosters, specifically after your rookie drafts. So in today's video, we're going to cover every position. We're going to talk about over 50 names that you should either cut from your roster or hold on because there's still some juice to squeeze from that limit. And by the way, every position is going to be split into two categories: year two players and veterans, and you can check out the timestamps. Starting off with the running back position, we are clearly going to keep names like Trey Benson. We've heard Jonathan Gannon talk him up in his potential year two role here. Tyrone Tracy, yes, he was definitely hurt in the draft by the Cam Scatterboo pick, but a guy who averages about 11 points per game last year as a rookie, definitely worth holding. Jalen Wright is a solid hold. They brought in Ollie Gordon, but they spent a higher draft capital on Jalen Wright last year. He has a chance to be the RB2 in this offense. Isaac Correndo, one of my favorite holds of this offseason, really, after they sent away Jordan Mason. I think he's going to be an important RB2 in that offense. And if CMC goes down, we know has a vast injury history. He's going to have a chance to make a fantasy impact on your rosters. Same thing can be said for the following names like Ray Davis if James Cook goes down, Braylon Allen if Breece Hall goes down. Audric Estime was actually a low-key winner, I think. I know they drafted RJ Harvey in round 2, but I think Audric Estime is going to have a role in this offense after they let go of Javonte Williams and a couple other names. And how about Marshawn Lloyd? I definitely think he's a strong hold. Is he not the biggest sneaky winner of the NFL draft? The Packers, in a stacked running back class, decided we didn't really need to look at that position. Obviously, they have Josh Jacobs. Marshawn Lloyd is a guy they drafted in the mid-rounds last year, could not stay healthy, so he is a low-key winner. Do not drop him from your rosters. Okay, the following list is the guys who are on the edge. We just don't know for sure. If you're in a larger league, maybe you keep these guys. If you're in a smaller league, you can probably cut them. Names like Jonathan Brooks. The reality is, I know he was a round 2 running back, but he's going to be out for the entirety of this season. Rico Dowdle is there at the moment, and they drafted Trevor Etienne, and Chuba Hubbard gets a long-term deal. I'm just really struggling, and maybe this is short-sighted for me, but I'm struggling to see why you would hold him in a smaller format. Blake Corum, in a smaller format, you know, again, we don't know exactly what's going on in Sean McVay's head, but they draft Jarquez Hunter this year, and kind of around the similar draft capital Blake Corum got last year, just a round difference. I like Jarquez Hunter a lot as a prospect, but with Kyron Williams there now and Jarquez Hunter and Blake Corum not really making that big of an impact as a rookie, I think in smaller leagues you can move on, in bigger leagues you should hold. Will Shipley now becomes, you know, along with A.J. Dillon, kind of that RB2 in Philadelphia, but with Saquon there, he probably has no value. Isaiah Davis, when we saw Breece Hall go down with an injury, Isaiah Davis was very useful in that Jets offense, but it's a new coaching staff. We don't know exactly how they're going to deploy these guys. And here are a list of guys that you can comfortably cut from this year 2 group. Names like Kamani Vidal, Dylan Lobb, who had 1 carry and it was a fumble, Sion Vaki, Rasheen Ali, after they signed a long-term deal there with Justice Hill. And now we've got, you know, another year for, what the is his name? Keaton Mitchell. Okay, here we go. They signed Justice Hill to a long-term deal, and we have another year of... Are you kidding me? Keaton Mitchell, Zach, you idiot. Okay, here we go. Justice Hill signed a long-term deal, and Keaton Mitchell is going to be healthy this year. Keelan Robinson, Jace McClellan, Jawar Jordan, and Frank Gore Jr. These guys are nothing burgers. Move on from them in any format. All right, how about the veteran running backs? Well, clearly Javonte Williams is going to have an opportunity to win the job in Dallas. Now, I don't think that's going to be very long-lived for him, but the reality is right now he is RB1 on that depth chart, so he's definitely worth holding, if not selling if you have him. Jordan Mason, I've been a big fan of all offseason. I think he has a legit role in Minnesota. J.K. Dobbins, obviously at the time of recording this, he was tendered. We don't know exactly what team he's going to play for just yet. Maybe he does come back to the Chargers. That would probably be worst case scenario at this point after they brought in Najee Harris and Amarion Hampton, but wait and see on J.K. Dobbins. Kendre Miller, another year where we don't have this coaching staff holding him back. If he can stay healthy, he has shown on the field he's a very effective runner. And Tajay Spears, all guys that are worth holding, clear roles in their offenses. Now, in smaller formats, you can comfortably cut the following names, these guys who are on the edge. In your bigger formats, you might want to hold on to them if you just don't have a waiver wire that exists, right? So names like Rico Dowdle. Yes, he is technically the RB2 in Carolina right now, but the reality is, with them bringing in Trevor Etienne, my opinion is even if Chuba does go down with an injury, I do think Trevor Etienne is going to have a role just as much as Rico Dowdle at this point. Let's talk about Nick Chubb. Look, in reality, I do think he's actually worth holding, but if he signs to a team here in the coming weeks that he's clearly not going to be the guy, then I think you can cut him. But there's potentially talks about him going to Chicago. That would put him more in the green rather than on the edge. But if he goes to, just throwing out an example here, he goes to Philadelphia, there's just no reason to keep him in that scenario, right? Rashawn Johnson, I think you can cut him in a lot of formats, but to be fair, they didn't bring anyone important into that offense. Names like Sean Tucker, Miles Sanders, I think you can comfortably move on from these guys in smaller formats. And regardless of how big or small your format is, you can cut all of the following names. Names like Zach Moss. You can move on from him. He's dealing with a neck injury. The same thing that happened to Chris Carson. I don't think he's going to be important to an NFL offense again in his career. Jerome Ford, after you draft both Judkins and Dylan Sampson, I don't see where Jerome Ford's work is going to come from. Cam Akers is a nothing burger. Kenneth Gainwell, after they brought in Caleb Johnson, is probably not going to have that big of a role with Jalen Warren there as well. Sincere McCormick is nothing. Antonio Gibson, Alexander Madison, Zamir White. Wow, that was terrible last year for Zamir White. You can move on. Ty Chandler's not even the RB2 in Minnesota anymore, and Deuce Vaughn was never going to be anything more than a special teams player. All right, let's move on to the wide receiver position. Year 2 wide receivers we'll start off with here. The guys who were rookies last year. We're clearly holding Ricky Pearsall, who I believe is going to have a big year in his sophomore season. Jalen McMillan, the draft was not kind to him, but he still showed flashes and showed that he could produce. So if they do move on from a Mike Evans here in the future, or if Chris Godwin's injury isn't exactly where they want it to be, he could still have some value. Jalen Coker, I personally believe that the Tet McMillan draft pick is actually good for a Jalen Coker. They need someone with an outside X presence. Jalen Coker can be their slot receiver if they want to play that way. Obviously, the opposite is true for Xavier Legette. Not great news for them to draft Tet McMillan just a year after they spent a first-round pick on Xavier Legette. I never really had that much belief in him personally. He did go round 1. Clearly, he can't be a guy that they can funnel their offense through, but this is someone that you don't cut. You can still get like a third-round pick for if you have him on your roster. How about Roman Wilson? Recently, we just saw George Pickens get traded to the Dallas Cowboys, so that opens up a huge opportunity here at the wide receiver 2 spot for Roman Wilson. Do not cut him. If he's available on your waiver wires, definitely go pick him up. Look, the reality is the wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh, we're not sure if that has any value, so the wide receiver 2 certainly might not, but the reality is you can probably sell him even if you don't believe in him long term. I still like Adonai Mitchell as a prospect. Hold on to him, and Malik Washington is someone that I would be rostering with. Feels like Tyreek Hill's kind of holding this team a little bit hostage. Every month there's a new tweet about him wanting to be traded, so definitely keep an eye on him. All right, in smaller leagues, we can get rid of some of these names like Troy Franklin, all right? With them signing Pat Bryant, it just makes that wide receiver room even more confusing. Jalen Polk, again, with the addition of Kyle Williams, Jalen Polk couldn't beat out a wide receiver room without Stephon Diggs, without Kyle Williams. I struggle to see him being relevant now. Jordan Whittington with the addition of Devontae Adams is really a nothing burger as well. Devon Vele, Malachi Corley, who did nothing in his rookie season outside of almost scoring a touchdown but dropping the ball at the 1-yard line. Jacob Coing. These are names in smaller formats you can comfortably move on from. And regardless of what format you're in, you can comfortably cut the following names. Luke McCaffrey. They brought in Deebo Samuel. They drafted Jalen Lane. Luke McCaffrey could have stepped up last year if he was going to be something. He showed nothing. I say this as a Washington fan. Javon Baker, you can move on. Taj Washington. Jermaine Burton can't figure out his off-the-field issues. It's never going to help him get on the field, unfortunately, right? Ryan Flournoy, you can definitely move on from at this point. Tez Walker, Anthony Gould, Jamari Thrash, Bub Means. I'm seeing so many Bub Means rostered when we're doing team playbooks for you guys. I don't know why, but you can move on from Bub Means. Johnny Wilson, Brendan Rice, all these guys are good to cut off your roster. You can sleep like a baby at night after doing so. All right, let's look at the veteran wide receiver market, okay? So guys that we're absolutely keeping on our rosters, names like Rashad Bateman, who showed he could be an important part of that offense last year. Cedric Tillman, who had a nice little stretch last year when he was healthy with Jameis Winston. Obviously we don't know what's going on at quarterback there. Is it going to be Joe Flacco? Regardless, there is definitely opportunity after they decided to move on from Travis Hunter, trade that pick, Now Jerry Jeudy's still your number 1 wide receiver, and the number 2 spot is wide open. I think Tillman could be that guy. Names like Boutte and Douglas, I think we're still rostering at this point. Wan'Dale Robinson still going to have a role there in New York. Hollywood Brown will be healthy, an important part of that Chiefs offense. And originally we had Jalen Tolbert as a stronghold at the top of this list, but to be honest, in smaller formats, I do think you can probably move on at this point after they brought in George Pickens. I don't see much more than 60 to 80 targets for him here in 2025. So I will say, logistically, you probably can move on from him. All right, how about Keenan Allen? Keenan Allen still hasn't signed for a team. That's a little bit confusing for me. It says a lot. There's a lot of teams that need help at wide receiver. They haven't brought him in. Probably you can move on from him in smaller formats, but in your 12-team start, 11, 20 bench spots, maybe you hold on to some of these guys. How about Tank Dell? I'll be honest, I don't think I would even send a 4th-round pick for Tank Dell in my rookie drafts this year. Do you guys disagree? I think in a lot of these small formats, your start 7 leagues, you're only 7 bench spots. I think you can comfortably move on from him, especially after they added not only Jaden Higgins, but they also added Jalen Noel. So what is the best case scenario for Tank Dell? He spends this entire season recovering, and then he comes back next year to a wide receiver room where he's competing to be the wide receiver 3. I don't know what the pathway is for him. So in smaller leagues, I would cut him to pick up other rookies in this class. Romeo Doubs, I'm comfortable to move on from. He's always been just a guy. And with the draft pick of Matthew Golden, I think he'll continue to be just a guy. Amari Cooper hasn't signed to a team. Maybe he will. Christian Kirk, I was actually very excited to hold Christian Kirk before the NFL draft with the Houston Texans having him. But now that they have 4 guys in that wide receiver room, I just don't see where he's ever going to improve his value or be relevant for you. Marvin Mims, I think you can move on from in certain leagues. Parker Washington and Deontay Johnson. Deontay could have a role in Cleveland, but he only signs a 1-year deal. It's barely any money. He couldn't produce for any team last year. There's some very weird off-the-field issues, but in deeper formats you can hold. In smaller leagues, it's probably time to cut. All right, here's a list of guys you can cut without blinking. Names like Jonathan Mingo, De'Ami Brown, Christian Watson, Dontavion Wicks. Let's talk about those first 4. Jonathan Mingo looked promising, but now he's maybe the wide receiver 3 or 4 on this offense. Not appealing to me. De'Ami Brown. I know Gabe Davis was just cut. I don't care. I think this offense is going to funnel through 2 names, Travis Hunter, Brian Thomas Jr. Christian Watson. Are you going to wait for an entire year for him to heal, to maybe be the wide receiver 3 on the Green Bay Packers? If you can send him away from a 4th, do it. Otherwise, you should trade him, just cut him at this point. Dontavion Wicks, you're gone. Mike Williams, you're gone. I know you're on the Chargers. I don't care. Yeshivas, Atwell, Hutchinson, Lockett. I know he just signed with a new team. I don't care. Jahan Dotson, Jalen Hyatt, Treylon Burks, Brandon Cooks, and Alan Lazard. You can move on from all these guys comfortably and sleep like a Bobby, okay? Draft with me every night this offseason on the FastDraft app, where there are over $250,000 in prizes waiting to be won. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That is 10 free drafts on us. And when you finish your first real money contest, I'll send you my 2025 rookie report and season rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today. All right, let's talk about the quarterback spot, starting off with the year 2 quarterbacks, okay? Joe Milton, definitely worth a strong hold in my humble opinion. The Dallas Cowboys trade for him. We've seen Dak Prescott struggle with injuries consistently over the last couple years. However, this season, there's finally a legitimate threat and a backup in Joe Milton behind him. Before, it was names like Cooper Rush, clear backups. We had guys like Trey Lance who were never going to do anything. Now you have a Joe Milton that has shown some real upside in his game. Why not roster this guy and see what happens long-term with Dak Prescott? Spencer Rattler, I think, is worth holding, especially with all of the uncertainty there in New Orleans, but I don't think it's going to be his job to win, if I'm honest with you. You can comfortably drop Jordan Travis. Very sad story, but he did retire from football after just 1 year in the NFL trying to recover from that leg injury. It didn't go well, and he didn't recover the way he wanted to, and his football career is done. You can also cut Devin Leary and Michael Pratt with ease. All right, how about the veteran quarterback market? Well, names like Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, these guys that are clear starters, I definitely think are worth holding on your rosters. But the following names, it really depends on your roster format. If you're in a 1 quarterback league, That's why they're on the edge. You can comfortably drop them. If you're in a super flex format, you should probably hold on to them and see what happens. Names like Derek Carr, who might not play this entire year. Malik Willis, who's a nice backup when he plays. He's a good guy for fantasy football. Daniel Jones, again, in a one quarterback, no enticement whatsoever. But in a super flex league, maybe he wins that job, right? Jameis Winston, same thing for him in New York. You can comfortably cut, in my opinion, names like Will Levis, Deshaun Watson. I don't care if the reports came out that he's going to be healthier this year. It doesn't matter. He's not good at football anymore, all right? The bad juju caught up to him. Aiden O'Connell, you're gone. Drew Lock, you're gone. Trey Lance, I can't tell you how many rosters still have Trey Lance. It's time to cut the umbilical cord and let him go, okay? All right, let's finish off this video with the tight end spot. All right, starting with year 2 tight ends, we're going to keep names like Ben Sinnott, who was a round 2 pick. All right, we're still technically on the Trey McBride path if you think about it, right? If you guys remember, Trey McBride had a decent rookie year and Ben Sinnott didn't do much, I'll be honest with you. But what sparked Trey McBride's production in his second year was a ACL tear from Zach Ertz. I'm not projecting that, but all I'm saying is it's still going to be wise to hold on to Ben Sinnott. Jatavion Sanders, let's give him another year to develop. Same with Theo Johnson. Jared Wiley, look, I think you can hold him in deeper formats, but the reality is, in most of your leagues, you're going to want to pick up some of these rookies instead, like the Trevor Etiennes, the Taj Brooks who fall in your drafts, you know, the Pat Bryants, the Torrey Hortons. These guys are much more fun, like what-if boxes, if you will. The following names you can cut confidently, like Cade Stover, Barner, Eric All, Tip Ryman, Tanner McLaughlin, and Jaheim Bell. They're not going to impact your roster whatsoever. And to end today's video, let's talk about veteran tight ends. There's no one that I really want to keep on this list. I will say Cole Kmet, I'm pretty comfortable to drop in almost every single format. I really struggle. I mean, right now people are debating whether we can trust Luther Burden, whether we can trust Colson Loveland. I think it's time to move on from Cole Kmet. Chigakonkwo. To be fair, they didn't add many big names in that offense. Could Chigakonkwo have a bigger role with a new Cam Ward? It's hard to say, but I think again, in that position where can I pick up a Trevor Etienne, you know, a Taj Brooks, you know, some of these guys off the waiver wire, Torrey Horton, Xavier Restrepo, I would rather have those guys than hold on to a Chigakonkwo. And the following names you can cut with confidence: Noah Fant, Dawson Knox, Tyler Conklin, Bellinger, Dulcich, Brevin Jordan, Darnell Washington, and Jelani Woods. After that, Tyler Warren draft pick. Jelani Woods just never developed into anything useful for fantasy football. So I hope that is a complete guide to your offseason cuts and your holds in the waiver wire. All right. I know this is a common question. I hope that that was a very helpful video. I appreciate y'all for being here with me. Do me a favor, hit that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you in the next video. Nothing but love. If you're thinking about supporting us in this economy, that's big love, and you deserve love in return. So for every yearly Mother Flocker member who uses the promo code LAND, we're giving out a free team playbook, our 2025 rookie report, access to all premium tools, free site vouchers, and of course, a huge thank you from the LAND crew. You're far too kind. That's love.